a different culture in a local one who has absolutely not the same habits, the same way, even the same worldview, I would say. And I think it's something that we have absolutely to avoid, and we have to think about this, because right now we are just doing some kind of neo-colonization, importing model that really doesn't fit the local culture, especially about, for example, the participatory processes. So what does it mean for the future? Well, for the future, it means quite simply that, as you know, the world is no longer the same, etc., but mainly it is not structurally the same. And as you know, in foresight, the difference between what is structural and what is not is the key to the understanding of what evolution is and what change is as well. So clearly, universities has to adapt themselves in order to be able to prepare, as Dr. Al Anezi said, the next generation of global citizens, clearly. But it is not only that, it's also that universities, as I said, still use this model very hierarchical of teacher and students. Fine. Yet what we can see emerge today, and especially with my student, I have been a professor during 28 years, and my students clearly at a certain point began to challenge what I was saying, because they have, you know this, they have their internet connection, their best friend, Google, so they check, oh, but you said the date was 1940, but maybe it was 1930. Okay, this is not the point, 40 or 30, but please come back with me to the concepts. And again, they challenge you, but by micro things, you know, turning around the concept, because they do not grasp the concept. And they do not grasp the concept because earlier, I mean, in the elementary school, and it's normal school as well, I mean, they do not acquire the necessary skills to understand the complexity of the world we are living in. So it's a whole chain of education that have to change. And basically, what does it mean to teach and to learn? And so I would suggest to replace, or to, not to replace, but to consider another way that would be eduning. Eduning like education. Eduning is basically the fact to educate ourselves as we can educate others. Educate is not, teach is not learn. It's something different, because there is appropriation in education that you do not have, it's just teaching, learning. So let's talk about eduning, to design this process to work on the local cultural substrate, which means that instead of just teaching desincarnate concepts and knowledge, you really root the knowledge within the local culture, and that you accept as teachers to learn from your student. Because, as you all know, we are human beings, which means that we learn by mimetism, biomimicry, not by memorization. Memorization is a superficial way to learn. We are just learning. If you want to educate yourself, then you have really to incorporate the knowledge within your experience and your way of doing and processing. So, anticipation, it's about how to prepare global citizen, how to stop to continue in this way of teaching things that are not adequate, but also in a way that is not adequate anymore. And finally, you have to keep in mind that the MENA region, you see how it is in the core of all the region around the globe that would be the most drastically affected by the change to come, from climate change to resource depletion to geopolitical tensions as well, social tensions also. So really, the challenge to, I wouldn't say to change the mentality, even if there is something like that, but especially to build a new mindset is absolutely crucial. And I do not believe that development is only an economic development, but I think it is first a cultural development. And there is an interconnection, intertwin concept here. So saying this means what? It means that if you do not succeed to, I mean, when I say you, it's all of us, of course. If we do not succeed to evolve our system of education, we won't succeed to face the challenges to come. And the risk to create tensions is just huge, global tension risk. And one of the risks I can see specifically is a risk to not achieve the current transition. And in the MENA region, this won't mean that we will increase and accelerate the brain drain, while we need a brain gain instead. We will raise domestic tension due to the unsatisfied aspirations of people, especially to freedom, to change, and so on. And finally, a rising gap between Muslim countries and the rest of the world that could lead to kind of isolation. So now the question is, what next? Of course. And what next? This is the third stage of foresighting, which is proposing. Among the proposition, I would just give maybe three proposals. The first one, it is not a proposal, it is just an observation that currently, I mean, during the last 20 years, many universities in the world, from Malaysia to Canada to, well, many countries, separately or collectively, has undertaken a foresight exercise to try to understand what could be their future. So doing a foresight exercise is never bad, anyhow. The second point would be that what we know for sure is that we need a new model of university. And this new model could be built on three pillars, which are ways to do the transition between the current model and the future model. The first one is to move from a teacher-centered university to a learner-centered university. The second one would be to go from the hierarchical teaching learning to a circular process of knowledge and questioning, which is the eduning. And the last one is from passing on the past, which is the traditional object of teaching, giving you the knowledge from the past, to preparing for the future, which means that we have to prepare teachers and to learn teachers to face the unknown. And right now, a teacher is only able to deliver knowledge, the known knowledge. And they don't know how to cope with what they don't know and how to help people to cope with uncertainty. So in the MENA region, this means that we have to develop social sciences. There is a crucial need for social sciences, understanding cognitive sciences and how people function as a society, as individuals. Second, it's for collaborative intelligence, because clearly there is an issue. We know that we cannot solve individually the problems of tomorrow. We have to work together. And finally, it is to transform the difference, diversity, in an asset. And I think that if we begin to do this, maybe we can change a little bit the world.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Fabienne, and appreciate it. In fact, that we need a model in the 2050, which is we were talking about earlier with Eric and other people, how the education should be in the future. Is it personalized curriculum or not? But that's bring me to a very interesting story before we go to Mr. Connolly. Before we we established our curriculum in the Prince Mohammed University. We did it with TAIC. TAIC is an education consortium, which is in the United States, 32 universities who designed a program. And they said, we need our students to be ready for the local market. And we were futurists before even knowing it. He said, look, we don't want our students to be in the local market. And this is kind of 18 years ago. We said we need them to be in the whole international market. I need my students to be ready to work in Berlin, to work in the United States. And then we have to redo the whole work, re-engineer it again. That's what we invented, what we call a global citizenship competencies. And that's what we have today. We're proud of our graduates, actually. And we have a few faculties here. I'm proud they are here, and they participated heavily. We believe in diversity can bring a lot of ideas, ideations, and such. Now we shift to Mr. Connolly. We mentioned what is best to learn about the future. Is it literature or lab? Exactly.
First of all, I want to make a confession. I am a dinosaur. I come from the humanities. Not only am I a dinosaur, I am virtually extinct. I say this to you without regret, without sadness. It's the 21st century. Where did the university come from? Where did Western universities come from? A scriptorium. Imagine it's the year 1400, you're in Paris or Prague or Vienna, and you're studying theology. And I take you from that room to this room. What would you be able to do? If I took you from that room to a classroom, what would you be able to do? Let's fast forward to the Freie Universität in 1890. Wissenschaft. Take that professor into a classroom today. He might have an easier time, but still, it's not the same thing. If we put the medieval scholar with the 19th century German scholar, they could probably have a nice conversation in Latin. My education, my PhD was from something called a Department of Drama. It no longer exists. It's now called the Department of Performance Studies, okay? And you tell me what performance studies is. Okay, I know, I've been there, but what does that mean to you? If we think about the 21st century and digitalization and digital arts and digital humanities, which 5 years ago, the first time I heard that term, someone from our dean's office walked in and said, we've got to have a Department of Digital Humanities and we need it yesterday. And there was one person in the room who knew what that was. And people turned to me, literature, theater, drama. Oh, you must feel threatened. I don't feel threatened. I'll be honest with you, I don't like change, but I'm not threatened by it. We live in the times we're given. And our job is to prepare our students. As we've just heard in a wonderfully elaborate and cogent discussion, what does a 21st century student need? I question whether there exists in the world a 21st century university. Okay, now I'm going to pull back and talk about humanities. The idea that many people have of what happens in a humanities curriculum, I would imagine, unless you're in a humanities department, you don't really know anymore. Most people think, oh, they read Shakespeare, or oh, they look at slides of Leonardo da Vinci. It hasn't been like that for 30 years. And this is also part of the problem that has redounded on humanities professors. With the advent of postmodernism and post-structuralism, and don't worry, I'm not going to bash theory, pure criticism, pure text-based criticism, pure art history, pure music theory, that professors and scholars aren't much interested in that anymore. And as a result, the idea of public criticism or public intellectuals is gone and lamented, and people say, oh, people in the academy only speak to the academy. It's true. And that's why when, at nearly the end of his second term, when President Obama said, well, you don't want your kid to be an art history major, within hours, art history majors were fleeing their departments. By the next semester, my English department had lost half of its majors. And they haven't come back, and they're not coming back. Now, 2021, what does the humanities curriculum need to do? That's the wrong question. Learner-centered education. Rather than looking at this as, I'm a Shakespeare specialist, or I'm a William Faulkner specialist, or, Albert Camus, c'est le centre de mon univers. That's not how it works anymore. The university must reshape itself. Another problem that I had to deal with in the United States was the imposition by the business school on the humanities curriculum. This is a much more serious problem than the so-called two cultures that C.P. Snow identified 50 years ago, sciences versus humanities, and never the twain shall meet. A more serious threat to any innovation in humanities education is the idea that we are training people to be managers. And the managers that they're being trained to be, it's still this idea, if you will, of a factory floor from 1930. Or, if you know the television series Mad Men, that you're going to go into an office and that's what you're going to do. Or you're going to be a financial analyst crunching numbers in front of 6 computer screens. Well, as we've learned at this conference today, I love this statistic, 65% of the jobs that will be needed, we don't even know what they are. So for a so-called practical business-centered approach to the humanities, that's a chimera. The big thing now in humanities is creativity and innovation, creating courses that teach creativity and innovation. I was part of the committee that started this at my former university. And the business school came in and said, you've got to do this. You've got to do this now. If we don't have students with creativity, they won't get hired, they won't have jobs. Older business professors were laughing out loud. And they were saying things like, here we go again. Every 5 years, there's a new gotta have. The humanities professors all jumped on the bandwagon because they know nobody wants Shakespeare anymore. Okay, I'll teach creativity and innovation. And so, everybody scrambled aboard. And rather than looking at a spectrum, rather than looking at the future, it's what are we going to do for the next 6 months? Well, our students are graduating in 4 years. So the lack of vision on all sides, it's everywhere. So what to do about it? One of the catchy professions right now is something called storytelling. And again, I remember when this came into the room, someone came from our university development office and said, I'm the university storyteller. And I thought to myself, where is your cap and bells? Where is your lute? Why aren't you, on a horse serenading us from the street? He's not a storyteller. That's a new way of saying public relations, okay? But with a narrative. Okay. Finally, something worthwhile. Narrative. What's a narrative? Sure, it's a story. Shakespeare created narratives. Homer created narratives. Harun al-Rashid listened to narratives from Scheherazade. But what is our narrative? What is the narrative of the 21st century? How are we going to express this? How are we going to explain it? Not using text-based narrative. It's going to be something else. Video games, video technology, telling character biographies in video games. To me, that's the beginning. And it may sound heretical to someone who thinks of Sophocles and Euripides as the greatest writers ever. But now, for our students to look to the future, we have to think holistically a la holograms. What is going to be, how is narrative going to be projected? And what will the narrative be? Not what is the narrative now, not how are you going to peddle Bitcoin, but how are you going to be a citizen of the world? How are we going to have global students? And not just, if I may differ a little bit, not just students who can work anywhere, but students who can live anywhere. Students who understand different cultures and will be able to read that narrative, will be able to grasp that narrative without prejudice and without fear. One of the things that is holding back the humanities is the fear of the future. Oh, they're destroying the arts. They're destroying beauty. If we crawl into a shell, pull a turtle head and circle the wagons, to use some metaphors, of course it will be destroyed. But if we adapt and be flexible and recognize that there are new methods of transmission. For instance, there's an art exhibit, The World of Van Gogh, traveling around the United States right now, which is an immersive arts experience. You walk in, the whole room becomes Starry, Starry Night, for instance. Now, that's not the painting. And there are purists who say, that's not Van Gogh, that's a slideshow. True. But let's go back to that room. The quill pen, the paper, the scribe, copying and copying and copying. The scribe who knew how to read, but probably didn't know what he was copying, really didn't understand it. If you've ever studied ancient texts, you know that the what's called the scholiast, it's full of errors. And there are also holes in the manuscript, and sometimes they just fill them in, figuring whatever they thought was right. So the texts that we know of Euripides or even Homer, those were recreated. Granted, there's a continuity of the act of making a text. But in the 21st century, we can do so much more. And in the 22nd century, we will do even more than that. And so I began by saying, I'm a dinosaur. But there were dinosaurs who could fly. And I believe the intellectual integrity of the humanities can transcend any technological innovation as long as we are willing to give up resistance and truly do what a humane person should do, and that is have an open mind. And as professors and scholars and facilitators for our learners, that is what we must do. So rather than thinking in terms of scholarship, really think in terms of humane education, for the education of the person as a global citizen or a citizen of the universe. Because universality is supposed to be the aim of education. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Connolly, and like what you said, the citizenship of, and you're still young, you're not a dinosaur yet. Yes. So we're going back now to Dr. Fabienne. Are the university in the 21st century now, or is there a model that's make us have a good hope?
Well, I would say that if you consider the MENA region again, you have had a model that could be this university of the 21st century that you are describing, Dr. Connolly. I'm thinking of the madrasa. If you know the story of madrasa, as it was designed by Al-Mulk, Nazim Al-Mulk, in the 11th century. At that time, he saw madrasa like, madrasa were places where itinerant teachers would go from a place to another one, from a madrasa to another one, along a very dense network all along the MENA region. And students would be able to get a very high level knowledge, because it was not students who were moving to the knowledge, but the knowledge moving to the students, which is very different. So it was student-centered, it was learner-centered first. Also, the way of teaching was a Socratic way of teaching, using dialogue. There were small groups of people talking all the day with this famous scholar coming from different places in the world. And so you had literally from Al-Andalus to Baghdad to Cairo and to Fez, you had an incredibly dense network of small groups with teachers coming from all the regions, so able to give very different vision of the world and very different knowledge, not only medicine like Avicenne, but many others as well. And so you had an incredibly high level of education in the madrasa network. So I think that we have here a model that was a great model. I don't know why it stopped, and this is another story maybe, but I think that if in the MENA region you could give a very deep look to this model and see how it could be adapted to the 21st century, maybe we could have something really, really great.
Well, thank you. Just to clarify, madrasa in Arabic is a school, and it is actually designed by Nidam al-Mulk, what we call at the time, and they want to do a network of schools, and they were the first one to implement this. But if you tell me what you do every day, I will tell you your future. I think we are approaching now our end. With like, I know to keep it light, and guys, I think he's online now. Okay, we have 10 minutes, guys, if you can hear me now. We'll be waiting for you, and I'm sure is worth waiting for. We have 10 minutes if you can conclude, and welcome on the stage. You're online now.
Okay. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Prince Mohammed bin Fahd University and the World Future Studies Federation for this his invitation. It's my pleasure to be among the panelists in this dialogue with my colleague Habib Fardoun, and to participate in this debate in education, the digital age, which is important to the process of building the future. As we can see, those images reflect the prediction errors. In this context, the presentation will be divided in 4 parts. A retrospective analysis in the past of foresight in education sector, diagnosis of the current situation, diversity of the scenarios in education, and finally, desirable and probable scenario. Let's start first by a retrospective analysis in the past of foresight in the education sector. In order to anticipate the future, it is important to reflect in the past, to ask the right question, and to identify the major trends and weak signals. Gaston Berger, one of the main founder of the discipline of foresight, called to adoption of the culture of foresight to field of education. He said that the field of education enables long-term visions, and he added that the world is changing faster than before, to the point that it is impossible to predict with precision to the activities that the human of tomorrow make do 20 years after they have left school or university. He also mentioned that foresight is a project for the futures. Gaston Berger Also added that the use of all the tools hinder the development of countries, and that teachers must change their method and adopt a proactive behavior. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven the incompetence of traditional methods of thinking and analysis. This method have generated a false perspective of the future, especially in the education sector, which has led to the emergence of many problems. To conclude, the future is now the result of action taken in the past and the present. Hence, the need to evaluate the future of the past that did not happen in order to learn from the past and anticipate better futures. The second key element of foresight analysis is the diagnosis of the present. We must identify the major trends that impact the present of education, like EI, the demographic situation, social problems, in order to plan the possible future in this field. We'll find that Gaston Berger diagnosis of the past is as valid today. Teachers, therefore, are still required to update their method and communicate means. To conclude this part, addressed the problem of digital transformation and how it is changing the world as we know it's today. For example, AI is gaining importance for the job market. Let's move in the third part of the presentation. Giving the importance of education sector, many international organizations developing scenarios for sector future in the horizon of 2040. The first scenario, the extension of the school, AI will enable the creation of educational structure. The second scenario, education outsourcing, for example, AI becomes the main driver of education and leads to cut with traditional education system. The third, school as learning centers. School will have new futures of teaching by teaching methods and social innovation. Fourth scenario, lifelong learning. The last scenario shed the light of the flexibility of education. AI will be behind this new form learning and we change of education system. We can conclude that foresight method lead the conclusion of the future cannot be considered in the single but in the plural, as there are many assumptions and field possibility. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the reality that we can no longer take the future of education for granted, and through imagining an alternative future for education to create a better future. Finally, it's a desirable and probable scenario. Considering the variety of this scenario regarding the future of education, the scenario most likely to occur in the coming year is impacted by various change factors that make to the educational context in each region specific in this environment. However, any prediction is an imposter. One cannot predict the future, but can strive toward achievement. There is a one. I would like to thank you, and I'm apologize for my English. I hope in the future we can have a translation from Arabic to broaden the garden target. Okay.
Hello. Dr. Reis, thank you so much. In fact, you made it 10 minutes, actually. Your English is superb. And I'm sure your French is good and your Arabic is better. But in the future, we will plan it to be personally, and still online things has an issue, because when you interact face to face, it is much better, and I hope you are safe there. I heard there is a pandemic stop you from coming here, and you are spiritually with us, so that's good. Now we are approaching to any, if there is a questions, if there is I see here students actually, and you need to focus in a lot of skills, and I hope you enjoy the journey with us with the WFSF, and I hope I said it correctly. And there is a lot of things to learn, and we learn every day. But again, the more the action you do today will define what you will do in the future. Do whatever you can, don't worry about it, so you'll be fine. Now, if there is any question to Dr. Fabienne or Connolly or myself, we are welcome. If there is no questions, okay. Rick, remember? He's the facilitator.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for great presentations and also great topics to be raised. I just want to pinpoint on one thing that was said, on the right corner here, is we don't know 60% of the jobs that we're going to perform in the future, we don't know about. And then it remains a question, are we satisfied with that statement? Or should we do something to not necessarily just create a kind of a creative infrastructure to meet that uncertainty, but also try positively to go into, to try out and define new kind of professions or new kind of job profiles or whatever. Because I've been working in the area of transdisciplinarity, and I see that the term transdisciplinarity is, moved in front of you to say that the current profession and the differentiation between different doesn't work anymore, so we have to move on. And the term transdisciplinarity is a term to describing that. And then I just raised a question, like they do in Finland, are we aiming at trying to find out positively what kind of jobs that's going to be? And we're going to make a lot of wrong, but you have to experiment with it and try to detect it. I don't know, if you respond a bit on that.
Well, the first thing that came to mind was the legend of the old British Imperial Civil Service, where supposedly Oxford and Cambridge graduates who only knew Latin and Greek went out and ruled an empire. It's a pretty story. But getting back to my point about the evolution of the university, I think a problem with the university is it really is a model to create researchers. That's the point of an academic department. Even in universities that don't have PhD programs, the idea is, you should have a PhD and everything you do should be related to your research. And another term that's common now is departments are in silos, and there's very little connection. People have been trying to break these down for years. They created things like American studies, which would be history, literature, everything. I think it's imperative now that we just forget about this idea of you're an English major, you're a biology major, you're a French major. That model just does not work anymore. But just, if I may say something personal, my own daughter is applying to college right now, and she mentioned that she might want to study Japanese. And I said, great, learn Japanese. She said, no, I'd like to be a Japanese major. And I said, well, the reality of being a Japanese major is you would become a professor of Japanese literature. But by all means, go to Japan, learn Japanese. That, just from my personal experience as somebody with a PhD, that was my advice to her. But I don't think things like that should be an option. You should go to the university and emerge educated through a variety of courses. Yes, there are certain technical things you have to learn. You can't be a surgeon and study, sports medicine. You have to do you have to have some specific learning, or you have to have legal training. But the idea that I'm going to choose my major now and that's it, and that's what the university does, and that's how a department gets funding because it has all these majors. It's really such a broken model, and the decline in the humanities majors, I think, is the evidence that this model needs to be reworked. And again, rather than resisting it, we should become genuine thought leaders and say, what can we do to really remake the university so that we create educated people, that we have learners rather than potential PhD candidates. Because I can remember shaking my head at my colleagues who would be always urging their students to go to graduate school. And I would say to them, how can you say that? 500 applications for one job at a community college, and you want to send this kid to chase after a PhD? You know, that's not a viable model. And there's so many other choices now, so.
I think you have a question there, Dr. Ma'amar. He's just busy with his phone. Is
it me? Or was someone? Is it me? Oh, yes. I can see if my question is emerging as I speak, so apologies for it being a bit rambling, but kind of picking up themes that are coming from this conversation. Education systems of today are inherited from the past, and the university structure that we currently have at sort of a global level, it seems to be one that was an innovation iterated over time. So this question of how to innovate the way we learn in society is very important. So this is like exactly the right thing to discuss. What I think about it is that we need a society that is like filled with learning. Every single aspect of society needs to be learning. So like governance needs to be learning, education or research systems need to be learning, companies need to be learning, and we need people who are ready to engage in what's interesting to know. Because that's what's always been, that's what's led to cool stuff. We all have computers in our pocket, right? Does everybody have one of these little weird Unix, Linux-based thingy doodles? This is because of Turing wrote a paper, right? So like Turing wrote a paper, and he didn't just do that out of the blue. He was like thinking about all sorts of weird stuff that mathematicians before him had like really started to pull forward. And I don't know, there was this guy named Freeman who was a famous, I think his name was Freeman. He was a quantum physicist in the United States, and he managed to like make one of the first drawings of like how quantum physics systems kind of work. And he made this sort of like scheme for drawing that. And people were like, that's amazing, how did you do that? And he's like, I was just interested. You know, I was really thinking about it. And I just, you know, it came. And this is where the innovations can come from. So like when I hear about stories about humanity departments getting pressed into like doing practical stuff for now, it's like, well, actually knowing how to be human is really kind of going to become potentially more challenging. You know, like as climate change comes, as, you know, the stuff we're struggling with as people, like COVID has been a test of humanity, right? Like how can we be compassionate humans and still like try to address like a really difficult medical situation on a worldwide scale? I mean, this is important stuff. And like, so I would be sad if like the humanity departments of the world just vanished and like people stopped being interested in philosophy and history and literature and learning how to read deeply and learning how to like think about meaningfulness. So I guess this is all just to say, I don't know what my main point is, but this is to say like, I wish for education systems in the future that are really just totally infused into everything around. And that everybody that we can meet can be as interesting as, you know, people you meet at a conference like this, where like when you're doing your daily work, it's just you're always engaging and trying to learn more and find the meaning and generate new meaning and new value for others. So just some thoughts and reflections, no questions. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, thank you. In fact, it's very useful. But I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, we don't know who in the future is going to design us. We're going to design the machine to run us, or the machine going to design something, we're going to work with it. So there's a lot of debate in the literature about these things, but I put a lot of emphasis on the social science and the skills we need to develop. In case of, I believe in the future that we have to go with a personalized curriculum. We're going to assess the students what skills he need in order to manage himself, and the same we assess his weakness, how he can develop himself, and that has to be in a human interaction rather than machine learn based. Again, if any questions, okay.
No, thank you very much for all the wonderful presentations. And about the role of the university, of course, I mean, I agree that university and how it is organized and so on has changed a lot over time. But it seems to me that the basic value, the founding value of the university are still there somehow. This effort to go there to acquire some knowledge, I would also say like more refined, a little bit superior knowledge, the place where to get the set of basic tools to deal with a specific discipline. It seems to me that it is still there nowadays, and I think that this can be and should be still the role of the university. So provide to the students that basic ground, because of course they will change job. I am a lawyer, so the law change. I mean, tomorrow there can be an act from the parliament and you can totally change everything, right? But the ability to deal with the basic skills of the legal matter, for example, will still be there. So I think that under this perspective, maybe you can see some continuity in the role of the university. And of course, and then I conclude, we don't know which job we will do tomorrow or in 50 or in 60 years. But it seems to me that the labor market and the policymakers already know this since a long time. We speak about lifelong learning, so university connecting also with the business and to try to deal with the need of the business. On the other hand, and this is the last thing, we should also keep in mind that, for example, and it happens, for example, in the US, for engineers, several companies prefer to hire freshly graduated people and maybe fire them after 5-6 years and hire freshly graduated people because they get the last advance on that specific domain without having to pay for the training. So I don't know, maybe we face a little bit two sides, but maybe more some consideration and thoughts than a question. Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting comment. Thank you very much, because I'm about to say something that will probably will not be very easily accepted. But let's remember that during the 19th century, we had this incredible discussion at the level of Europe between people like Condorcet, the French scholar, wanted to have two separate institutions: research within academies, what he called at that time academies, and universities, just to teach normal persons. And you had Humboldt. We are in the Carré Humboldt. And we had Humboldt, the Prussian one, saying that no, you have to merge research and education. Maybe the source of our troubles today lies in the decision that was taken at that time to choose the Humboldt model and not the Condorcet one. So, building on what you said about research and university and just what you said, sir, it seems to me that at least the beginning of rethinking our universities, also like Nick said, because we have to rethink finally not only our paradigm, but the world in which we are living right now. We should have something, maybe called university whatsoever, that could only be focused on two things. The first one would be something like humanship. What does it mean to be human? How can I be different from a robot, an artificial intelligence, which is so faster than I am, so large, broad scoping than I am by definition, because it is an artificial intelligence. But me as human, who I am? What are my assets? What is my value? So this would be the first pillar. And the second pillar maybe would be this enduring things, a kind of long life education support system, if I can say so. I mean, how could we give this interest in people, this curiosity, this spirit of explorer to be courageous enough to face the unknown, to face uncertainty, to face with the complexity of the world, the current world, and the challenge to come. But do it with confidence, because we are human, because we can learn continuously, because we can continuously hope to improve our way of knowing the thing, of understanding the thing. And if we succeed in 2, 3, 4 years, maybe, who cares, to give this, we will have so more intelligent people, not intelligent in terms of academically intelligent, but a smart, clever in terms of being quick, thinking holistically, and thinking humanly, with compassion as well. So this could be the first thing, and leave the knowledge, I mean the academic one, with the researchers in another institution that would really be a place where you do not ask researchers to teach because they don't know to teach. I'm sorry to say so to my colleagues, but they do not have a clue about pedagogy. They're just going in front of the students. They don't care if the students will understand or not, but they just deliver the knowledge and they research. So maybe, well, at least from my point of view, I think that there is something to dig in here. Thank you.
Actually, it causes trouble because we have our faculty and we request them to do research. Now we have to re-enjoy the thing. I think we are approaching our end, and I enjoyed it myself. He's a colleague, and Mr. Connolly and Fabienne and Dr. Eric. I'm sure there is no more questions. Do you have a question, or shall I call you here to come? Okay, so I think Dr. Qais, can you hear us? Anyhow, we thank you anyway, and I think we end our session. I would like to keep it light as much as we can, and we enjoy other people's sessions. We can see you now, Dr. Qais. Any other words we'd like to highlight before we end the discussion?
That's okay.
That's a very quick answer. Thank you, and we'll see you in the future events, and hopefully with this pandemic dissolve, completely. We thank you all.